Hello everyone, welcome to Frightful Whispers. I'm here to guide you into the shadows tonight. I know you're using this video to unwind and drift off to sleep. So, before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Where are you watching from? And what time is it for you? Now, get cozy, relax, and let the whispers of the night take over. The night was heavy, almost suffocating, like the world itself was pressing in on me. I glanced at the clock, 12:45 a.m., and for the 1,000th time that night I felt the weight of the hour. It was always like this during my shift. The streets were empty, the city asleep, and the only sound in the world was the hum of the bus engine beneath me. A steady, rhythmic drone that made everything else fade into the background. Out there, beyond the bus windows, was nothing but darkness. The streetlights flickered every now and then, casting a sickly yellow glow on the wet pavement. I didn't mind it. In fact, I was used to it. This was my routine, my life. Driving this bus down the same old roads, taking the same quiet route night after night. There was comfort in the stillness, in the predictable monotony. But tonight felt different. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but the night felt wrong, heavy, like something was waiting just out of sight. Maybe it was the fog that had started creeping in, thick and low, blanketing the street in a way that made everything seem distant. The headlights barely cut through it, and I had to strain my eyes to see the road ahead. The air inside the bus grew colder, thicker, like it was pressing against me. I glanced at the rearview mirror. The city behind me was disappearing, swallowed up by the fog. Everything out there was gone, just blank. I shook my head, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling that had settled in the pit of my stomach. It's nothing, just the fatigue. I turned the radio dial, hoping for some distraction, some sound to break the eerie silence that was closing in around me. But there was nothing, just static, the cold, empty silence of the night. That's when I saw him. Up ahead, near a bus stop that I knew all too well, there was a figure. A silhouette standing completely still under the dim light of the street lamp. It was strange. Nobody waited at that stop at this hour. Everyone knew better than to be out here this late. So, why was he standing there? I slowed the bus, my foot hovering over the brake, my eyes locked on the figure. I tried to see him clearly, but the fog was thick, and he was too far away. The figure didn't move, didn't even seem to acknowledge the bus pulling up. There was something about him, something wrong. I don't know how to explain it. He looked like a man, tall, dressed in a long coat that swallowed him whole. But his head was tilted down, hidden beneath the brim of a dark cap. And for some reason, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was waiting for me. I stopped the bus, my heart beating a little faster than usual, and the doors opened with a sharp, unnerving hiss. The sound of them cutting through the quiet night felt louder than it should have been. But still, the figure didn't move. He just stood there, as if he was expecting me to open the doors for him, as if he had nowhere else to go. I stared at him for a moment, my hands tight around the steering wheel. Something was wrong, but my job was simple. Pick up the passengers, get them where they needed to go, and keep my head down. This wasn't supposed to be any different. So I did what I always did. I waited. And then finally, after what felt like an eternity, the man began to move. His steps were slow, deliberate. He climbed aboard the bus without a word, his presence filling the empty space inside like a shadow. I felt a coldness that wasn't there before, as if the very air had grown heavier. He didn't sit near the front. He walked past me, not a single sound accompanying his movements, and took a seat near the back. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still watching me, that his presence was hovering in the periphery. always just out of sight. I glanced at the rearview mirror. The seat behind me was empty, but the reflection didn't match the empty seat. It was like he was there, just out of view, not quite a part of this world. I swallowed hard, trying to shake off the unease creeping up my spine. Maybe it was the fog. Maybe I was just tired. But as I kept my eyes on the road, my hands gripping the wheel a little tighter, I couldn't help but wonder, who was he? And why did he feel like he didn't belong? I focused on the road, but it wasn't enough to push the growing sense of dread from my chest. And then, out of nowhere, his voice, low, smooth, cut through the silence. "You've always been alone, haven't you, Rick?" I froze. My heart stopped for a beat. How the hell did he know my name? I didn't even know who this guy was. I didn't recognize him from any of my regular routes. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. "What did you say?" I managed, my voice rough. The figure didn't move, but his voice came again, calm and unbothered, as if we'd been in conversation for hours. "I know everything about you. Your mistakes, your regrets, your failures. You can't outrun them, can you, Rick?" I felt the world shift. My skin crawled. How? How did he know any of that? I gripped the steering wheel so hard that my knuckles went white. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of this madness. Was this some sick joke, some prank? But there was nothing funny about it. The bus, the road, the fog, they were all closing in on me, suffocating me. And in that moment I realized something worse. I wasn't alone in this bus. Not really. I looked in the rearview mirror again. The seats that had been filled by passengers, where were they? They were all gone. All of them. Not a single soul remained. Just the empty, dark space behind me. I blinked, my breath quickening. The figure was still sitting in the back, silent now. But my mind was spiraling. Where did they go? The other passengers. They had been there, right? But they weren't. There was only him. I slammed my foot on the gas, desperate to break free from whatever this was. I drove down the road, my heart pounding, but something was wrong. I wasn't moving forward. I wasn't getting anywhere. I looked at the sign, the same one I'd passed 100 times before. Waverly Creek. But how? I had already passed this sign. I had already seen this stretch of road. What the hell is happening? I looked back in the mirror. The seats were still empty. The man was still there, staring at me with those hollow eyes. And then he spoke again, his voice colder than before. "They never existed, Rick. They weren't real. They never were." I slammed my foot on the brakes, the bus skidding to a halt. I stared ahead. The fog was thick, closing in on me. The road stretched on endlessly, as though it had no end. And then I realized I had no idea where I was going anymore. The doors slammed shut, and with it, the sound of reality broke apart. The bus continued, its engine roaring, pulling me deeper into the fog. The night felt different. I couldn't explain it at first, but something about the air seemed wrong. The usual hum of the bus engine, the rhythm of my tired eyes scanning the road, was suddenly drowned out by an eerie quiet that pressed in on me from all sides. I glanced at the clock, 12:45 a.m., same as always. The streets were empty, the city had long since fallen asleep, and I was on my usual route. But tonight, the silence felt heavier. It felt like it was waiting for something. I tried to shake off the unease gnawing at the back of my mind, but it wouldn't go. Maybe it was the fog, so thick it wrapped itself around the bus like an invisible hand. The headlights barely cut through it, and the world outside seemed to vanish beyond a few feet of glass. The dim yellow streetlights flickered, weak and distant, as if even they were afraid of the darkness. The bus moved steadily along the empty roads, the only sound the low, monotonous hum of the engine. That's when I saw him. There, just ahead, standing at the bus stop under the flickering streetlight, was a figure. A man. Or at least, that's what I thought at first. His silhouette was almost too still, like he was part of the fog itself. But there he was, tall, cloaked in black, a long coat swirling around his legs as if it had a life of its own. I couldn't make out his face, not at first. His head was tilted down, his cap pulled low over his brow. But something about the way he stood, so unmoving, so unnatural, sent a chill creeping up my spine. I slowed the bus down as I approached. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks. Maybe he was just another late-night passenger. But then again, I had never seen anyone wait at this stop at this hour. People didn't usually wander around in the middle of the night, certainly not alone. I came to a stop, the bus doors creaking open with an unsettling hiss, and waited. He didn't move. He didn't even flinch as the bus pulled up. His gaze was fixed ahead, unmoving, like he had been expecting me all along. My gut twisted, and my fingers tightened around the wheel, but I had a job to do. I opened the doors. He stepped onto the bus without a word. There was no sound, nothing except the soft scrape of his shoes on the steps, the faint whoosh of the door closing behind him. I watched him, but something kept me from looking too closely. He passed me, moved down the aisle without making a single noise. He didn't sit near the front where the light hit him. No, he chose the back. He took a seat far from me, his presence filling the space, pressing against me like a weight I couldn't shake. I tried to focus on the road, but I couldn't ignore the uneasy feeling creeping through me. I glanced in the rearview mirror, my hands tight on the wheel. That's when I saw it. Him. He didn't reflect in the mirror, not clearly. It was like there was something wrong with the glass, like his image wasn't meant to exist in this world. His form seemed to blur and twist, bending the light around him. No shadow, no trace of his figure. Just an empty space where a man should have been. My heart skipped a beat. Was I seeing things? I quickly turned my gaze back to the road, my throat dry, trying to push the growing panic away. The road was empty. The fog thickened, as if trying to swallow the bus whole. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the road was closing in on me. The streetlights outside didn't seem to reach far enough anymore. They flickered erratically, disappearing behind me, as though the night was rejecting them. That's when the voice came. "You've always been alone, haven't you, Rick?" My blood turned cold. My hands gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles went white. How the hell did he know my name? I forced myself to glance in the rearview mirror again. His face, I couldn't see it. It was hidden beneath the cap, but I could feel his eyes. Those eyes, empty, hollow, dark. "Excuse me?" I croaked, my voice shaking more than I wanted to admit. He didn't answer right away, just sat there, unmoving. His silence was worse than any words could have been. But then, in that slow, calm voice, as if he were speaking to someone he had known for years, he continued, "I know everything about you. Your failures, your regrets, your loneliness. You think you can outrun it, but you can't. It's always with you, Rick." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. How could he know any of that? Who was this person? And why was he saying these things? I swallowed hard, my grip on the wheel tightening. My mind raced, trying to find a way out, some explanation, but nothing made sense. Suddenly, the bus hit a bump. I looked up. The road, the landscape outside was wrong. Familiar, yes, but wrong. I had passed this sign, Waverly Creek, before, just moments ago. But now I was staring at it again. I slammed on the brakes, my heart pounding in my chest. Had I turned around? But no. The same sign, the same stretch of road, the same thick fog. I had been here before. It was like I had driven in a circle, like the world itself had looped. But that was impossible. I couldn't have. Could I? I turned back to the rearview mirror, my breath shallow. The seats behind me, empty, all of them. Just the man, him, sitting there. His eyes, those hollow black eyes, locked on me, unblinking, watching, waiting. Where did they go? I whispered, barely able to form the words. He didn't move, didn't flinch, just smiled. A twisted, unsettling smile that didn't reach his eyes. They were never real, Rick. Not a single one of them. His voice was so smooth, so calm. And for the first time, I felt the weight of his words sink deep into my bones. My stomach churned, my skin prickling with the cold realization that he wasn't just talking about the passengers. He was talking about me. I turned the wheel, desperate to get away, but the road stretched on endlessly, twisting and turning in ways I couldn't understand. The fog swallowed everything. The world outside was fading, slipping further from my grasp. I was trapped. The doors locked with a loud final click, sealing me in with him. The bus kept moving, though I didn't know where to. The city was gone. The night was gone. And I was left in this endless stretch of fog with the man who shouldn't exist. And as I glanced back at the rearview mirror once more, I realized the terrifying truth. There was no way out. No one else was on the bus. Just me and him. The one who was never really there. The night felt different, like a thick, invisible weight had settled over everything. I didn't know how to explain it, but it was there, pressing down on me. The air inside the bus felt too still, too thick, like something was about to happen. The usual hum of the engine, the familiar rhythm of the tires on the road. Everything should have been normal, but it wasn't. My eyes kept darting to the rearview mirror, though I didn't want to look. I couldn't help myself. I'd been driving this route for years, same streets, same dark hours. But tonight, something felt wrong. It was almost as if the fog outside had swallowed the world, wrapping the bus in its cold embrace. The streetlights flickered weakly, casting long, sickly shadows that didn't seem to belong. My fingers tightened on the steering wheel, and I took a deep breath, trying to push the feeling away. 12:45 a.m., the clock on the dashboard read. Time seemed to stretch, and yet the night didn't move forward. I glanced out the front window. The fog was thickening, swallowing the road ahead, pulling me deeper into the emptiness. That's when I saw him. At first, it was just a shadow, a dark figure standing at the bus stop. I slowed the bus, squinting through the windshield, trying to make him out. It didn't make sense. Who would be waiting for a bus at this hour, and in this weather? It felt like something was waiting. But waiting for what? The bus doors hissed open, and I felt the cold rush in, just as the figure began to move toward the bus. The steps creaked as he boarded, but he didn't make a sound. I barely saw him, just the billowing black coat, the low brim of a cap hiding his face, his tall frame swallowing the dim light of the bus. He walked past me and sat in the back, his movements too smooth, too silent. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. My eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, almost against my will. The man was sitting there, perfectly still, the darkness around him making him appear even more like a shadow than a person. I tried to force myself to focus on the road, but I couldn't stop thinking about him. He didn't feel real, he didn't feel like he belonged in this world. The bus moved forward, the engine humming softly beneath me. But every turn felt off. Every mile felt strange, as if the road itself was pulling me somewhere I didn't want to go. I glanced at the clock again, 12:55 a.m. I'd passed this sign, this stretch of road just moments ago. But there it was again, Waverly Creek, the same sign, the same street, the same trees, the same fog, thickening around the bus like it was closing in on me. I slammed on the brakes, confusion flooding my mind. Had I passed this spot before? It couldn't be. But when I glanced in the rearview mirror again, I saw nothing but empty seats. The passengers, the people who had been here just moments ago, they were gone. The man was still there. Still sitting in the back, not a single movement, not a single sound. My heart began to race, my breath shallow. Where did they go? I couldn't tear my eyes away from the mirror. I turned to look behind me. The bus was completely empty, save for him. I didn't know what was happening. My mind screamed at me to drive on, to get out of here, to leave whatever this was behind. But I couldn't move, I couldn't look away, I didn't even know how long I had been staring at the empty seats. And then, his voice. "You've always been alone, haven't you, Rick?" My blood ran cold. I felt a chill spread through my body as I stared at the road ahead. How did he know my name? I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat closed up. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. "What did you say?" I croaked, my voice trembling. His tone didn't change. It was soft, calm, detached. "I know everything about you, your mistakes, your regrets, your failures. You can't outrun them, Rick. You've been running from them your entire life." The words struck me like a blow, a heavy weight settling on my chest. I didn't know how to respond. How could he possibly know? The things I tried so hard to forget, the things I buried so deep inside of me, the failures, the loneliness, the broken pieces of a life I could never put back together. He shouldn't know. He couldn't know. But there was something in the way he spoke, something in the calmness of his voice that made me realize he wasn't guessing. He wasn't speaking hypothetically. He knew. He knew everything. The fog outside seemed to press in closer now, the world outside the bus becoming more distant, more unreal. I couldn't shake the feeling that the road beneath me was no longer the road I knew. I glanced at the sign again. Waverly Creek. Again. I had passed that sign. I had already been here. I slammed on the brakes, my mind spiraling out of control. This can't be happening. But the road kept stretching on, the same stretch of asphalt, the same trees, the same fog. I looked back in the mirror. The seats were still empty. I turned to look at the man in the back. He was still there. His eyes, dark, hollow, empty, met mine through the rearview mirror. His mouth twitched into something resembling a smile, though it never reached his eyes. "They were never real, Rick," he said, his voice colder now. "None of them. The passengers, the people on your bus, none of them existed. They were never really there. They were just figments. Shadows, like you." I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to believe it. But I couldn't stop myself. What was happening? Why was this happening? I couldn't look at him anymore. I couldn't look at anything. I felt trapped, suffocated. The fog had closed in around the bus, its tendrils curling over the windows, swallowing the world outside. The air inside the bus felt thick, oppressive, and I realized I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I couldn't escape. "Where are we going?" I whispered more to myself than to him. My voice sounded strange, hollow, empty. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. I could feel it, deep in my bones, the truth settling in around me like a cold, dark blanket. The road was endless. The fog would never lift. And the man in the back, the one who was never really there, would never leave. and as I looked in the rearview mirror one final time, I realized I wasn't driving the bus anymore. The bus was driving me. The night felt off from the very beginning. I could sense it in the thick, suffocating air that seemed to press in on me. The hum of the bus, the comforting rhythm of the tires rolling over the road, usually something that would settle me into the monotony of my shift, felt strange tonight. Each sound seemed louder than usual. The engine's growl a constant reminder that something wasn't quite right. The clock on the dashboard read 12:45 a.m., but time didn't matter. It felt like it had stopped, like it was stretching out into something infinite. The fog had rolled in thick, curling around the bus like a blanket. I could barely see a few feet in front of me as the headlights sliced through it. The road stretched out endlessly ahead, the streetlights flickering weakly in the distance. I was alone. I always was on these shifts. The night was mine to drive through, a quiet, empty world where nothing seemed to matter, or at least it used to feel that way. But tonight there was something else. Up ahead, barely visible through the swirling mist, I saw him. A figure standing at the bus stop. A man. My mind told me it was just another passenger, just another person waiting to be picked up in the middle of nowhere. But as I slowed the bus to a stop, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't right. The figure didn't move, didn't flinch as the bus pulled to a stop. His eyes, though I couldn't see them clearly, felt as though they were already watching me. He was waiting for me. I opened the doors, the cold air rushing in, and he stepped aboard without a word. He didn't sit near the front where the light was brighter. No, he moved past me without a sound, taking a seat near the back. His coat, long and black, flowed behind him as if it had a life of its own. I couldn't help but watch him, my heart thumping faster with every passing second. He didn't feel like a normal passenger. He felt wrong. His presence seemed to distort the air around him. He didn't belong here. I forced my gaze back to the road. I had a job to do. I had to get through this night, just like all the others. But I couldn't stop thinking about him. That odd feeling, like I was being watched, never left me. I glanced at the rearview mirror, trying to distract myself, trying to focus on something. Anything other than the figure sitting quietly behind me. But what I saw in the mirror made my stomach turn. The passenger in the back wasn't there. The seat was empty, just empty. I blinked. I must have been seeing things. Maybe the fog was messing with my mind. Maybe I was just tired. But no, I had seen him. I knew he had been there. And now he was gone. I turned around quickly, panic creeping into my chest. The bus was silent, empty. But how could it be? The other passengers, where were they? The ones who had been sitting in the rows behind me. Where had they gone? There had been people on the bus just moments ago. I wasn't imagining it. I slammed the brakes, my heart racing, and the bus screeched to a stop. The fog outside pressed up against the windows, making everything look hazy, like I was trapped in some other world. I stared ahead, trying to calm my breathing, my mind a mess of confusion. The road had to be a blur. My tired eyes were probably playing tricks on me. But when I looked back at the mirror, everything felt wrong. The seats were empty. I turned to face the back again. The man was still gone. The other passengers? Gone. All of them. Where had they gone? Where did they go? The silence was deafening now. It was like the bus had become a tomb, sealed off from the outside world. The usual low hum of the engine had faded, and all I could hear was my own breathing. I felt trapped. There was no way out of this. My mind was screaming, trying to make sense of it, but the more I thought, the more the world around me seemed to unravel. I turned the wheel sharply, trying to shake myself out of this spiraling madness. I had to get out of here. I had to get back. This was wrong. Everything was wrong. I accelerated, but the road didn't change. The fog thickened, swallowing the bus whole. The headlights barely lit the way, and every turn I made just led me back to the same stretch of highway, the same sign, the same trees, the same emptiness. The more I drove, the more the world around me seemed to vanish. I was no longer sure if the road in front of me was real, if I was even really driving anymore. It felt like the bus was moving through a dream where I couldn't wake up. And that's when I realized it. I had been on this stretch of road before. I had already passed this sign. I had already seen these trees. I had already been here. I glanced at the rearview mirror again. I had to see him. I had to see the man who had boarded so silently. But when I looked, my reflection stared back at me, wide-eyed and frantic. But then the reflection shifted. I was alone. I wasn't imagining this. I wasn't. The passengers had been real. They had been here. But now there was no one left on the bus. The doors locked with a loud final click, and the fog outside pressed closer, thicker, the headlights useless against it. The world around me was gone, slipping further away with every second. The bus kept moving, relentlessly, as if it had a destination, though I couldn't see it. I had been driving the same stretch of road for what felt like eternity. And yet, I had no destination, no end. I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time, and for the first time I understood the terrible truth. I wasn't driving anymore. The bus was driving me into nothing, into a place I could never leave. And I knew, deep down, with a horrifying certainty, that I would never find my way out. Never again. It felt like something was suffocating the world around me. The fog, thick and relentless, clung to the bus, wrapping it in an oppressive, weighty silence. The headlights cut through the mist, but barely. It was as if the road ahead was dissolving into the nothingness, leaving me in an endless void. I could hear the tires humming softly, almost mockingly, beneath me, a sound that should have been comforting. But tonight, nothing was comforting. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was driving in a dream, a nightmare. And no matter how fast I drove, no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't wake up. I glanced at the dashboard, 1:15 a.m. Time had stopped making sense. Every minute dragged into the next like I was stuck in a loop, a world that wasn't real. The streets, the fog, the bus, they all seemed to stretch on forever. My hands gripped the wheel tighter. Sweat beaded on my forehead despite the chill. I was alone, yet somehow the emptiness felt too full, like something or someone was watching me from the shadows. The road was still endless, never changing. I kept driving, but it felt like the same stretch of highway over and over. The same trees lining the edges, twisted and gnarled, reaching out like skeletal hands. The same crooked sign for Waverly Creek, faded and worn from years of being out here, standing like a forgotten sentinel. I looked into the rearview mirror again. The seats were empty. All of them. There were no passengers now, no one but me. But there had been people, right? I had seen them. They had been here just moments ago, waiting at the stops, staring out the windows as I drove them through the night. I knew I wasn't imagining it. But now, I was the only one left. Panic began to claw at me, creeping up from the pit of my stomach. I slammed my foot on the brake. The bus skidded and the tires screeched, but there was no real stop. The fog had grown thicker, swallowing the road as if it didn't want me to leave. I was still driving, still moving, but the world had blurred, disappeared behind me, faded into nothing. I looked at the dashboard again, 1:20 a.m., impossible. I couldn't have passed the same stretch of road again, but I had. The sign, Waverly Creek, was staring at me through the mist. Again. I felt the cold sweat forming on the back of my neck. My heart pounded in my chest as my mind raced. Had I missed something? Was I hallucinating? Was I even on the road anymore? I had driven past this exact spot before, hadn't I? I couldn't breathe, couldn't think clearly. Every part of me screamed to stop, to turn around, to get off this road and never look back. But my foot was still on the gas, my hand still gripping the wheel like it was the only thing tethering me to reality. I glanced at the rearview mirror. Empty. The silence pressed in harder. It was suffocating now, curling around me like the fog, thick and smothering. No matter how much I tried to focus, no matter how much I tried to fight the growing panic inside me, I couldn't escape it. The seats. Empty. I looked at the back of the bus and it was the same. The same vacant seats, the same cold air swirling around me. I turned in my seat, desperate to understand what was happening. But there was nothing. Just the thickening fog, the empty bus, and the same stretch of road stretching endlessly in front of me. The man, the one who had never been there, was gone. The passengers, the people who had once been here, gone. But I hadn't imagined it. I saw them. I had heard their footsteps, seen their faces in the dim light. Where had they gone? The world felt like it was unraveling. Each thought, each movement, was swallowed up by the darkness creeping in from all sides. I turned the wheel desperately, trying to turn off the path, to break free from whatever trap I had fallen into, but the road didn't change. It was still the same. Still the same highway, the same sign that didn't move. I was stuck in this loop, trapped in this endless circle. I hit the gas pedal harder, hoping to break free, hoping to escape. But the fog closed in faster. The lights barely cut through it. The road stretched on and nothing looked familiar anymore. Or maybe it was too familiar. Maybe I had driven this exact stretch of road 100 times already, each time a different version of the same nightmare. I looked at the clock again. 1:25 a.m. How was that possible? The time didn't move. I didn't move. The bus just kept going. I looked back into the rearview mirror. Again, the same thing. Empty. The seats, the aisle, empty. It was as if the bus was a shell, an empty container drifting through the fog with no passengers. But I knew better. They had been here. I had seen them. The passengers who had gotten on and off. The ones who had disappeared. They were here. And now they weren't. The panic surged through me again, suffocating me, clawing at my throat. Where are they? I turned the wheel again, but the road remained the same. I was still driving, but the world around me was falling apart. The fog, the darkness. It was closing in, folding over itself like some kind of sick illusion. I glanced at the rearview mirror one more time. Nothing. I jerked the wheel, my heart racing, but it was no use. I was no longer in control. The bus was moving on its own, the road leading me forward with no end in sight. The clock blinked again, 1:30 a.m., and I realized with a sickening clarity that I wasn't going anywhere. I was trapped. There was no turning back, no escaping. The bus kept driving, the road stretching endlessly ahead, the fog growing thicker with every mile, and the world outside slowly being swallowed by the nothingness. I had no destination, no way out, just the endless loop. And the fog was closing in, forever. I can feel it now, the fog, thick and suffocating, pressing against the windows like it's trying to crush me. The bus, this endless, moving cage, seems to have become a part of it, a prisoner of its own making. The headlights barely make a dent in the mist, casting long, jagged shadows that seem to stretch out of the darkness, and wrap around me. The engine hums, a constant low vibration beneath me, but everything feels distorted, like I'm no longer driving through the real world. It's like I'm floating through a dream, or worse, a nightmare. I glance at the dashboard. 1:15 a.m. Time doesn't seem real anymore. It feels like hours have passed, or maybe it's only been minutes. I don't know anymore. Every second feels like it stretches forever, like I'm stuck in a place where time has stopped, where I'm trapped in some kind of infinite loop. The fog outside is never ending, its tendrils curling and reaching into every corner of the bus, consuming everything. I look in the rearview mirror again. It's empty. Again. The seats behind me are vacant, as they should be, but I can't shake the feeling that I'm not alone, that there's something, someone, watching me from the shadows. I look over my shoulder, but the back of the bus is still empty. There's no one there. And yet, something is wrong. The air feels thick, heavy with a presence that's suffocating me. I turn my eyes back to the road, but it doesn't matter. The road never changes. The same trees line the path, twisted and gnarled like skeletal hands reaching out to pull me in. The sign, Waverly Creek, appears again. How is that possible? I've already passed it. I've seen this sign before, again and again. It's like I'm driving through the same stretch of road over and over, each mile blending into the next. The same stretch of fog and road, no matter how fast I go, no matter how many turns I make. My hands tighten on the wheel, my pulse quickening. This isn't right. None of this is right. I slam my foot down on the brakes. The bus screeches to a stop, the tires screaming in protest. I stare out at the road ahead, trying to make sense of it, but the fog has swallowed it whole. There's no end to it, no way forward. The headlights do nothing but cut through the thick haze, creating more shadows. The sign, the road, the trees, everything is the same. How? I look back at the rearview mirror again. My heart skips a beat. The seats, empty. They're still empty. I don't know why, but I can't tear my eyes away from the mirror. I need to see something. I need to make sure I'm not losing my mind. But the moment my eyes lock on the reflection, my stomach lurches. There's something, someone, sitting there, in the back, the man, the one who shouldn't be there. His eyes, those dark, endless eyes, they're locked on me, staring right through me. His face is obscured by the brim of his cap, but I can see the shadows beneath it. I can feel them. I can feel him, watching, waiting. But when I turn around to look at him directly, there's nothing. The seat is empty. The bus is empty. The panic surges, sharp and raw. I'm suffocating. My breath comes in short gasps, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what's happening. But I don't know what's real anymore. Nothing makes sense. The fog closes in tighter, pressing against the windows like it wants to swallow me whole. The road ahead is the same, unchanging. I keep driving, but it feels like I'm not really going anywhere. The clock on the dashboard flashes again, 1:25 a.m., but the time doesn't make sense. It doesn't move. Time isn't real here. I glance at the rearview mirror again, empty, and then I see him again in the reflection. That same man, sitting in the back, his face still hidden beneath the cap, but his eyes. Those dark eyes. I can feel them deep inside me, like they're searching for something. Like they're pulling at something inside me. I turn around again, desperate to see him, to understand what's happening, but the seat is empty. There's nothing. The back of the bus is silent. The world is silent. The silence presses in around me, thick and suffocating. The fog has closed in even further, completely surrounding the bus, and the engine's hum is the only sound left. I can't move. I can't breathe. It feels like I'm suffocating in this endless loop, This endless road, this endless fog. I slam my fist against the wheel, frustration boiling over. I look ahead at the road, at nothing, and for the first time, I realize the terrible truth. I'm not driving forward, I'm not going anywhere. I'm trapped. Trapped in this never-ending loop, this nightmare that I can't escape. I keep looking at the sign, the road, the fog, the empty seats, but they never change. The bus moves forward, but there's no destination. There's no end. There's only this, only him, the man who isn't really there, the man who has always been there. And as I stare ahead, the fog pressing in tighter, I understand. The road isn't leading me anywhere. I'm already here, and I will be here forever. Thank you for venturing into the shadows with me here at Frightful Whispers. Remember, the darkness holds secrets, but also whispers truths to those who dare to listen. If tonight's tale sent shivers down your spine, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. It helps keep the fire of fright alive. Rest easy, but keep one eye open, for the night is never truly still. Until we meet again, stay vigilant, stay curious, and let the whispers guide you.